What's up guys, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm back from a video where this time we'll be talking about Chris Paul, the point god, one of the best floor generals in NBA history. And when we talk about Chris Paul, there's always two things that come up. First up, the fact that he has no championship ring, and second is that he's always unlucky when it comes to the playoffs. And this year in Phoenix, CP3 has been extremely good and also extremely lucky with no severe injuries. And because of its immense impact, the Phoenix Suns are once again back in the playoffs and the second best seed in the Western Conference. Now, like many of you guys, I'm hoping Chris Paul can finally win a championship ring this year, as the Suns have a very good supporting cast surrounding him. But in Chris Paul fashion, he's already unlucky before the playoffs start, as the Suns are matched up versus the defending champion Los Angeles Lakers. Definitely a great reward for being the second seed and making the playoffs for the first time in over a decade. Now, in this specific video, I'm going to walk you guys through Chris Paul's career and show you just how unlucky he is. And I'm going to prove to you guys that CP3 is the most unlucky point guard in NBA history. Now, before we get into that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure to do so. And if you could like this video, I'd greatly appreciate it. So with that being said, let's get into the video. So first up, we're going to start in 2012 with Chris Paul's first year on the LA Clippers. And this year, LA made the playoffs for the first time in a long time, and they had a very good young squad. And in the first round, they were matched up versus the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, the Clippers in this series would win, but in Game 5, Chris Paul suffered a groin injury, and Blake Griffin in that same game had a sprained knee. And after that groin injury, CP3 was really never the same for the rest of the postseason, as he only averaged 13.5 points per game, 8.0 assists, 5.0 boards on 38, 24, and 84 splits. And in the second round, they lost to the Spurs in 4 games. So definitely some bad injury luck for Chris Paul in the 2012 playoffs. Now looking ahead at 2013, the Clippers would once again improve, winning a franchise record 56 games. And once again in the first round, they played the Memphis Grizzlies, and this time they went up 2-0. But over the next 4 games, they would lose every single game by double digits, and in Game 5, Blake Griffin would suffer a severe ankle injury, missing the last 2 games of that series, and the Clippers and Chris Paul would lose in 6 games. Now looking at 2014, we have an infamous Clippers season, as this year you had the Donald Sterling scandal that involves some really awful off-the-court actions. And if you believe in karma, look to Game 5 of the second round versus the OKC Thunder. In this game, the Clippers were up by 7 points with 49 seconds left, a game they win 99% of the time. But over the next 49 seconds, absolute disaster would ensue, as Chris Paul had some crucial turnovers, and the refs blew some big-time calls. And the only way I can describe that last 49 seconds is divine intervention. The basketball gods simply did not want the Clippers to win that game or that series. So once again, Chris Paul had some extremely bad luck that potentially cost him a championship ring or a finals appearance. Now looking at 2015, the Clippers would bounce back strong, once again win a franchise record 56 games. And this year, LA was the second best seed in the Western Conference, and because of that great accomplishment, they were rewarded with the San Antonio Spurs, the defending NBA champions, in the first round. Now this was a very hard-fought series, very evenly matched, and it would go 7 games, with Game 7 being Los Angeles. In this game, Chris Paul had the best game of his career, and also one of the worst games of his career, as he had 27 points on 70% shooting, and the game-winning shot late in the fourth quarter. But in Chris Paul fashion, in this game, he would injure his hamstring, it would cost him to miss the next 2 games versus Houston in the second round. So even when Chris Paul reaches absolute peak in the playoffs, he is brought down by some unlucky injury. Now if you want to talk about being unlucky, look at that second round series versus Houston. LA in this series was up 3 games to 1. And in Game 6 in Los Angeles, they had a 19-point lead with just under 2 minutes left in the third quarter. But in typical Clippers fashion, they would blow that lead and lose the series in 7 games. Now looking at 2016, LA would come back strong, winning 53 games and having the 4th best record in the Western Conference. And in the first round, they went up 2 games to 1 on the Portland Trailblazers. But in Game 4, Chris Paul would suffer a broken right hand, and he would miss the rest of the series, which LA lost 4 games to 2. And in 2017, it wouldn't get any better. At this time, Blake Griffin, his co-star, will go on in Game 3 versus the Jazz with a plantar plate injury, and he would be out for the entire series, which LA lost in 7 games versus the Utah Jazz. So that right there is 6 terrible years of bad luck for Chris Paul and the LA Clippers. And looking ahead to 2018, CP3 will be traded to the Houston Rockets and hopefully avoid the Clippers' curse. Now with CP3 in Houston, they win an NBA best 65 games, and they would make it all the way to the Western Conference Finals versus the Golden State Warriors. And CP3 up to this point in the playoffs was playing great, averaging 21, 5, and 5, and he was going head-to-head versus Steph Curry. Now looking at Game 5 of the series, Houston would win this game, but Chris Paul once again would go out with a hamstring injury that would keep him out for the remainder of this series, and Houston would play a 3-2 lead. And that right there is the closest Chris Paul ever came to winning a championship, and that was an absolutely devastating injury for a very good Houston Rockets team that had championship aspirations. Now looking at 2019, Chris Paul, his second year in Houston, this right here would be the worst year of his career stats-wise, and Houston would lose in 6 games to that same Golden State team without Kevin Durant in that Game 6. And that right there was the summary of the Chris Paul experience on the Houston Rockets. And after that year, he was traded to OKC Thunder, a team that he once again revived into a playoff team. And you can't overstate how great Chris Paul was this year. He was an MVP candidate, and he was arguably the most clutch player in the entire league. In the first round, he would play his former teammate, James Harden, and the Houston Rockets. And this series unexpectedly would go 7 games, but in this Game 7, Chris Paul would have a big-time missed shot down the stretch with 45 seconds left, and OKC would lose that game by 1 point. So really in 2020, Chris Paul had no major bad luck. I guess you could call that shot bad luck, as usually he is knocked down from the mid-range. Now looking at 2021, this year with Phoenix, he has also revived that team into a championship contender. As this year the Suns had the second best record in the Western Conference, and they made the playoffs for the first time in a decade. Now very similar to Chris Paul in 2015, this Suns team in the first round is facing the defending champion Los Angeles Lakers. Definitely not the team you want to see in the first round. And as I'm making this video, Chris Paul in Game 1 had just gone down with an injury early in the first quarter. Now he did come back briefly, but since then he's been to the locker room multiple times to get treatment on his shoulder. And I have no idea how this series is going to turn out, but I just find it so sad that Chris Paul once again is getting injured in the playoffs, and I could not believe my eyes as Chris Paul and the Suns have been so lucky and so fortunate. And I think watching this Game 1 so far, Phoenix has looked very good, but Chris Paul after this injury has not been himself. He's rarely shooting the ball, but he still is a high basketball IQ player, and I think if he is hindered, he still could have an impact on this series because he's so great. It's just so unlucky and so unfortunate that he had this injury so early in Game 1 for this Phoenix Suns team. So that right there was a summary of Chris Paul from 2012 to 2021, and I think it's pretty obvious that Chris Paul has had his fair share of bad luck along the way. And that's why I think he's the most unlucky point guard in NBA history, and you could argue the most unlucky player of all time. Now, like always, I want to hear your guys' thoughts. How do you think this series is going to go with Chris Paul being injured? I think LA already was the favorites, but this devastating injury could really swing the series in LA's favor. So as always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys next time.